Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and as you can see, I'm wearing the same shirt I was in the last video. Doing two videos tonight, and I hope to keep up with that trend for the next week or so, because my family is down in Florida, seeing to the health of my father-in-law, who just got out of the hospital. So prayers would be appreciated for him and for them. But I got a little bit extra spare time now, so I'm going to try to get some of these videos out. That doesn't mean the quality is going to suffer. Going to put in the same amount of effort and study that I do into all of these, but we're going to try to get a few more out as I have the time to do so. So anyway, tonight we're going to be studying Deuteronomy chapter 18, just like a number of these chapters have had. We're going to have several thoughts being presented within each of these chapters. Really and truly, the people who gave us the chapters and numbers, not inspired. If they had wanted to, they could really have broken these down into much smaller units to really divide it up. But then Deuteronomy would have 300, 400 different chapters as opposed to the 30-something that it has. So anyway, we're going to deal with those topics tonight. We're going to look a little bit into the New Testament again, like we did with the last video. We're not going to be in John. We're going to be in the book of Acts, which you can see up here on my tabs here, because Moses makes a direct prophecy about Jesus, and we'll touch on all of those things. So our first topic is going to be the Levitical priesthood and coming to Jerusalem. If a Levite is in another city and they decide to come to Jerusalem to serve, what they're supposed to do with that, and so on. So let's go ahead and get started. Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 1. The priests, the Levites. This has been said many, many times in the book of Deuteronomy. The priests, the Levites. God is specifying. And we talked in the last video a lot about God specifying and what that means. Get into Hebrews chapter 7, verses 12 through 14. God said, the priests, the Levites, and he spake nothing concerning the tribe of Judah with regard to the priesthood. So I just wanted to bring that up. God is being very specific here on purpose. The priests, the Levites, and all of the tribe of Levi, so not just the descendants of Aaron. Remember, the priest only came from Aaron, but you have this larger tribe of Levi. And all of the tribe of Levi shall have no part nor inheritance with Israel. They didn't get land of their own. They shall eat the offerings of Jehovah made by fire and his inheritance. So they would rely wholly on the sacrifices that were brought to the temple, offerings made to God. And not just the priests, but all the Levites. Therefore shall they have no inheritance among their brethren. Jehovah is their inheritance, as he has said unto them. And this shall be the priest's due from the people, from them that offer a sacrifice, whether it be an ox or sheep. And they shall give unto the priest the shoulder and the two cheeks and the maw. So they were to give these to the Levite tribe, the people who, remember, were given care of the tabernacle, later the temple. Their whole duty was to, number one, the sons of Aaron were the priests. They were to see to the priestly duties, dealing with the sacrifices and the daily spiritual welfare of the people. And then the Levites, the larger tribe outside of the sons of Aaron, were to supplement that. They were supposed to supply to the physical needs of the priests in whatever cities that they were serving in. But particularly the tabernacle and the temple, he says, in the place that I will show them, but we know that's to be Jerusalem. So they didn't get to have their own land. They could not grow their own crops. They did not have their own herds. And so they did not have their own way of supporting themselves. They could not support themselves. The people were supposed to do that through their sacrifice. The priest, therefore, this is ingenious. The priest, therefore, had a very powerful and real reason and motivation to keep the people faithful to God, because God would bless the faithful people. The faithful people would continue to make those sacrifices, And those sacrifices were literally the food that the Levitical tribe, the priest and the support, lived on. And so as long as they were doing their job, the people would be faithful, the people would sacrifice the way they were supposed to, because that's part of their faithfulness. And it was a great symbiotic circle. The priests started falling down on their job, and the people started wandering off out after other gods. Suddenly the Levites don't eat. And there's a major connection that's there. One of the things that you read about when the tribes separate, you have the 10 northern tribes and the 2 southern tribes. Levi is not part of that. Levi is not listed in either of those sections. Manasseh and Ephraim are 2 of the northern tribes that are essentially half tribes, but each one of them got their own land inheritance. Levi didn't get a land inheritance. And then the southern tribes were Judah and Benjamin. But who's still around in the time of Christ? The priesthood. And those had to come from, the Levites had to come from Aaron. And so when you get Caiaphas and Ananias and those guys talked about in the New Testament, Levites still around. They just don't have the land promise, and they don't have those things. So anyway, this is the due from the people. This is the part that they get. Also, the first fruits, also of corn and wine. That word "yea" in there, of course, we automatically take to mean alcoholic. In this case, I think it's a little bit more general. I think we're talking about the first fruits of the corn, the vine, if you will, and of the oil, and the first fleece of thy sheep you shall give to him. So all of the first fruits, the things that are the first part of the crops, but not just the first, but also the best. That's what first fruits really are about, is the first and the best. Those 2 things go hand in hand, given to the Levites. So the Levites not only got what was sacrificed to God, but God demanded the best. So the priests not only got food supplied to them by the people, they got the best. And so there was a lot of responsibility, a lot that God put on the shoulders of the priesthood and the Levites in terms of that responsibility. But there were some pretty good perks there too. Can you imagine getting the best food and the best drink and the best of everything, because God demanded it as sacrifice, but didn't let it go to waste. It wasn't just consumed and gone. It was actually used by the Levites. And so they're getting the benefit. Definitely have a motivation to remain faithful, to keep the people faithful. For Jehovah your God has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand to minister in the name of Jehovah, him and his sons forever. For how long? Forever. How long did forever last? Till the cross. The Levitical priesthood was done away with at the cross. Christ fulfilled that role. He became the new high priest under the new law. And so we don't have the priesthood like they had to go in and do the sacrifices every year and all the time. By becoming the perfect sacrifice, Christ ended forever. He ended forever. They're supposed to be the priests to stand and minister in the name of Jehovah, him and his sons, forever. Forever ended at the cross. And it's very important, and I harp on this every time we come to this phrase. It is important to understand that forever had a duration. And it was a finite duration that ended at the cross. And so we have to understand this concept of forever in context. And it says, and if a Levite come from any of the gates out of all of Israel, where he sojourned, and come with all the desire of his mind unto the place which Jehovah shall choose. So you got a Levite, he lives in one of these other cities, and he decides that he doesn't want to live in that city. He wants to go to the big house. He wants to go to Jerusalem and serve in the temple in Jerusalem. The Lord shall choose. The place which Jehovah shall choose, we know that's Jerusalem. So he wants to go to Jerusalem. He wants to serve there. God says, okay, Then he shall minister in the name of Jehovah his God, as all his brethren the Levites do, which stand there before Jehovah. God says, all right, come on up. You can serve me just like everybody else. And you shall have like portions to eat. They get the same benefit that everybody else does, beside that which comes of the sale of his patrimony. So what that means is that the Levites did have some possession in the cities that they were allowed to live in. And if he decided to move to Jerusalem, he would sell that. Wherever he was living, he would sell that, move his family to Jerusalem, and his personal portion would be from the sale of all of that. So he would have money. He might buy like a house or something there in the city, and then that would be his. It didn't fit the inheritance laws the same way as the other tribes. The Levitical priesthood, they had to live in certain cities, and they had their own kind of laws on what they could own and where they could live and all that. But it didn't follow the same laws because there wasn't inheritance there. They did not have give to the generation after generation, and it had to go back to them at Jubilee or any of that stuff. So anyway, if he sold his house, let's say in whatever city he was in, and he decided to move to Jerusalem, he could buy another house there, and that did not have to be exactly the same as all the other priests. But the portions of food and all the other blessings that came from being a priest, he got the same exact as every other priest that was serving in the temple. Okay? And so that ends that section. That the whole part about the Levites and the priests and stuff is done in this chapter. Okay? So he switches gears here. Verse 9. When you are come into the land which Jehovah your God gives you, you shall not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. Now there's that word abomination again. God uses that word to say that this is the most despicable. It's usually worthy of death. When God says abominations, death is probably involved somewhere, somehow. There's a lot of laws that God said, hey, if you get caught doing this, you need to offer an animal, sacrifice, and you can get forgiveness, and it's okay. God says it's an abomination, this person needs to be put to death. That's how he pretty much delineates between the two things. And it isn't that there are different levels of sin. One sin is worse than another. They all have the same spiritual consequence. It's that the physical consequences, the consequences of the effect that it has on the nation are different. So worshiping other gods, abomination, put them to death. Adultery, abomination, put them to death. And then all the things that we're about to talk about here, abomination, put them to death. You don't get to offer a sacrifice for doing this. You purposefully went off and worshipped other things, other powers. Even though they're fake, they're false, they don't really have any power at all, which is dumb on you, but you went after another power than the creator of the universe. And that's abomination. You will be put to death for it. Okay? So it says, when you come into this land, don't do after the nations that are already there, because the things that they do are the reason I'm destroying them by your hand. So don't do them. There shall not be found among you anyone that makes his son or daughter to pass through the fire. Okay, big thing here. God does not want human sacrifice. It is an abomination to him. Okay, but what about Abraham and Isaac? God did not actually make Abraham sacrifice Isaac, was never going to make Abraham sacrifice Isaac. God was using that as a teaching tool, and I've covered that in multiple videos talking about the reasons for that. So you can go back and watch those videos and get the details on it. God does not actually ever want human sacrifice. Absolutely not child sacrifice. It is abomination to him. We'll come to the judge Jephthah and his foolhardy vow. And everybody's like, well, he sacrificed his daughter. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Absolutely no, he didn't. And I'll cover that when we get there. God does not want human sacrifice. He considers children to be innocent blood, and you cannot shed innocent blood. So anyone who makes his son or daughter to pass through the fire, human sacrifice, child sacrifice, put him to death. Very first one he lists. Don't do child sacrifice. Don't do it to fake false gods. Don't do it for any reasons. Don't do it to me. I won't accept that it's abomination. You'll be put to death for it. Don't do it. Or that uses divination. The idea of divination is asking questions or trying to find out information through supernatural means, usually to a fake false god. Some of this was done through appealing to spirits of the land. There was a number of ways that these divinations would come about, but it was basically what we would think of when we pray to God for wisdom, or in this time of miracles when there was divine revelation, new information coming in. People would pray to God, I need to answer to this. This is too hard for me. Remember last chapter he says, if there's a judgment that's too hard, you go to the judge and I will tell the judge essentially what to say, because the judgment is too hard for you to figure out because it's so complex or whatever. Divination was going to another source besides God for information. Most of the time, well, all of the time, the diviners were charlatans seeking money, power, fame, all those kinds of things. They couldn't really tell you the future. They're basically your fortune teller types. They give you, you guys, the fortune tellers, what's the saying? Why don't fortune tellers win the lottery? You see them in these crappy little huts or these little tents or whatever, and everything is like old and worn and threadbare and whatever, and it's supposed to be mysterious, but it's basically because they're poor. Why don't they win the lottery? Why don't you see very wealthy crystal ball people? Well, it's because they can't really tell the future. They really can't give you anything. In fact, all the information they give you is either fed to them through very sophisticated means, because facial recognition, social media, credit card information, like all that stuff is like they got a thing in their ear, they're listening, like all that information is fed to you, and they speak in generic terms that are vague, that they're essentially letting you fill in the blanks. They speak in a way that uses words that allows you to fill in the details, so it makes it seem like they're filling in the details. And my uncle just died, and or my best friend just got married, or all of these things, and it's such a show. It's total not supernatural stupid stuff. But because they're going to one of these fake false gods, or one of these sources that are not the creator of the universe, God says it's abomination. Okay? Or an observer of times. What is that? Does that mean we can't look at our watch? Does that mean we can't check out the clock, find out what time it is? Every student in my classes would be condemned under this if observer of time meant somebody who's watching the clock. Because they are all sitting there, when are we done? When does this class get out? They asked me 185 days. Like they couldn't learn it the first week. Mr. Lawrence, what time do we get out of this class? I have posted like 10 schedules around my room saying, this is this bell schedule. Every time they ask me, I point to one on the wall, whichever one's closest to them. Stop asking me that question. They want to know what time it is. That's not what this means. Observer of times are astrologers. They're the ones that look up at the stars, and they make up these calendars, and they make up these times, and Mercury's in retrograde and all of this kind of stuff, where they think that somehow, remember, the stars, the sun and the moon and the planets and all of these things, these heavenly bodies, chapter 17, we just got finished talking about it, they were considered minor spirits and deities, or in some cases major spirits and deities, to the pagans. So the sun, Ra, Egypt, Jupiter, the Romans later on, who is Mercury? He's the messenger god. Venus, the goddess of love. Mars, the god of war. That's why Mars is red. So they think blood. They think war. And all of these different planets that they could see with the naked eye, and they would chart their movement. That's why they knew that they were they're given names based on the fact that they saw them moving where all the other stars don't really move. Now the Earth rotates, and of course the stars change position, but they all change with each other. But the planets don't. The planets move through the sky kind of independently. They knew all this, and so they gave them names that related to their their deities and stuff. And so these observers of times, these astrologers, all tied into pagan worship, and it's all fake. It has no actual power to do anything. The only thing that stars and planets and the moon and all of that affect us with are the natural forces: gravity, electromagnetism, and probably not weak and strong forces, but the bigger forces of gravity and electromagnetism from these giant space bodies, planets and stars and stuff. That's the only effect they have on us, is that connection. And anybody who's getting into this observer of time thing, it's just as fake as the rest of it. An enchanter or a witch, or charmer, a consulter with familiar spirits, a wizard, a necromancer. These are people who would do, well, go back to the time of leaving Egypt. The people who were the advisors to Pharaoh, the magicians who tried to replicate the miracles that Moses was performing by the power of God. Moses turned a staff into a snake. Real staff, real snake. The diviners, the enchanters, had snakes that were frozen into staves, using, I guess, like kind of an acupuncture type thing or whatever. And then they released them from that. They were snakes already, but then God had the big snake swallow them up. They did the water to blood. They did the frogs and some of the other ones, the earlier ones they could reproduce. They're all fake. The consulter with familiar spirits, that's the spirits of the dead. The necromancer, the people who would, the word mance means to charm, and necro meaning the dead. So they were the charmers of the dead. They would speak with the dead people. You get to the witch at Endor that Saul goes and converses with. They don't really have power to do the things that they say that they do. None of that is real. But it draws people away from God because they're looking for essentially a power that is within the hands of the people. God grants power. God grants the people of Israel power. He grants the apostles power. He grants the Christians of the first century power. All of this supernatural power. And today he grants us power via the gospel. We have a power that's greater than the supernatural. We actually have the gospel. But that power serves a specific purpose of bringing us closer to our Creator and of restoring those who, through sin, have been separated from their Creator. These forms of power, which are all fake, they aren't real power. They don't have the capacity to do the things that they say they have the capacity to do. They don't really talk to the dead. There isn't really a spirit that they're talking to. The Ouija board doesn't really contact the ghosts of the dead or demons or any of that nonsense. It's all fake. But what it does is it gives the illusion that there is supernatural power that we can reach out and grasp. And that we personally, individually, can have control over supernatural things. That's what they're really wanting. Is I don't want it. I don't want to submit myself to God, and I don't want what God gives me and what God knows that I need, and so that's what He gives me. I want to control and have the things that I want, that I desire. Need isn't a part of it, but control and the self-determination and the willfulness is what is wrapped up in all of this. And it takes us away from God. It says, I don't need God, I don't want God, I want to do things my way. And again, we come back to presumptuousness from the last video. We get into arrogance. And it's evil. Just as evil. In fact, I'm going to make this connection here. the person who tries to do the supernatural that is beyond what God has given them is exactly the same as the person who tries to worship or to be saved by their own desire and doing things their own way, their own presumption, their own arrogance. They're both the same kind of evil. Because God has said, do it this way. You have said, no, I'm going to do it this way. I know better than God. God says, I'm going to reveal to you my will, and you say, no, I'm going to go to a diviner, and I'm going to find out what I want to know, rather than what God knows that I need to know. And it's all the same, because that's what sin boils down to. It's either God or self. You know, I posted up on my MeWe the other day, my truth is absolutely selfish. The truth is absolutely selfless. And I think that sums up exactly what Moses is referring to here. Is you're talking about all these people who are talking about my truth, and you know, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and we're gonna look at the stars, and we're gonna look at the planets and how those affect our lives, and divination and witchcraft and dead bodies and talk to the dead. God says no. God says, I will provide what you need. You leave all this other stuff alone. For all that do these things are an abomination unto Jehovah, and because of these abominations, Jehovah your God does drive them out before you. Why were the people being driven out of the promised land? The people that already lived there? Because they were doing these things. They were working that which was abomination. They were committing child sacrifice. They were killing off their children in the hopes of gaining some kind of power or personal desire fulfillment. Man, where do we have a modern version of that, where we kill our own children to further our own personal desires, to get something that we want, and the children are either a means to get that, or they're an inconvenience and we need to get them out of the way? Oh yeah, 1973 Roe versus Wade. We made the murder of children before they're even born legal in this country. The word abomination applies. I cannot think of any other word in any language that is more fitting. An evil abomination is what it is. And, you know, look what happened to these people. God drove them out before the righteous, before Israel, for their abomination. We should probably take note of that. Verse 13, you shall be perfect with Jehovah your God. Come on, God. Human beings, it's just human nature. There's no way we can be perfect. There's no way we can be sinless. Why would you even command this, God? You're commanding us to do the impossible. You're giving us a command that we can't fulfill. It's just a catch-22. Why would you do that? Well, we just got finished reading John chapter 8 in our last video, and probably a couple other videos before that. Go and sin no more. 1 John chapter 3. The faithful, the children of God, do not sin. Can you go and sin no more? Can you be perfect with Jehovah your God? Could you be perfect under the law of Moses? Anybody who says no is either ignorant or a liar, because Jesus showed us that it was possible. Entirely possible. Oh, but Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus was human. 100% absolute human the way that you and I are human. He could truly be tempted. He had just as much potential to sin as you or I. Everything about Jesus was exactly the same. If it wasn't, then he was a fake sacrifice. His sacrifice is absolutely meaningless if he isn't one of us, if he isn't human. Yes, he's also the Son of God. Yes, he is deity. Not denying that, but he did not cheat. He did not have special help. He is human. And he was perfect before Jehovah his God. You can be perfect under the law of Moses. Totally possible. You can be perfect under the law of Christ. It's totally possible. A lot of people don't want to hear that. A lot of people, it's just human nature to sin. No, human nature, go back to Genesis chapter 3. Human nature is that we are designed in the image of God. Our first priority, our first look is godlike. We have to learn sin. Sin comes with knowledge. What did Adam and Eve eat? They ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Our children learn from us. Our children learn from the TV. Our children learn from our neighbors to sin. Could you imagine parents who were so Christ-like that they did not sin? And they never taught their children to sin and never allowed them around influences that taught them to sin? What would those children be like? What would they grow up to be like? God commanded, "You shall be perfect with Jehovah your God." And even if we fall short, all of us who are immersed into Christ for the remission of our sins have sinned by definition. Romans 3:23 and 24, that's what that verse is about. But even those of us who have sinned in the past, if we fill ourselves up with Christ and we deny ourselves, deny our personal desires, the more we mature, the older we grow as a Christian, the less and less we will sin. And I believe that we can reach a point in this life where we go and we sin no more. Sin just doesn't have any appeal to us. What could sin provide to us that we even want anymore? Because we filled ourselves up with Christ. We have filled ourselves up with God the Father. We have filled ourselves up with the Holy Spirit through our study of the Word, through living Christ-like, and we see the benefits that come from it. We just don't have any room or time or desire for sin anymore. It just doesn't appeal to us anymore. Now, I'm not saying that that's where I'm at. Don't put that into your head. Don't put that into my mouth, because that is not what I'm saying. I still got a long way to go before I get to that point. But I believe that point is achievable. I believe it's a worthy goal for us to shoot for. And I think that we sometimes rest on this idea of, sinning is just human nature. We're gonna sin. I have to sin. Well, that makes God a liar, because he says that every time temptation comes, he provides a way out. And I think maturity in Christ is getting better at recognizing that way out and choosing that way out more and more often. And I don't want to just kind of give myself license to sin. What does Romans chapter 6 verse 1 say? Shall we sin that grace may abound? I don't want to say, well, that's just human nature, I'm going to sin, and excuse it. Or worse, say that about my kids. Catch my kid doing something that's sinful. Oh, well, that's just human nature. No. What did God do when people were caught committing adultery, or when they were caught doing this divination, observer time, they're sacrificing their children? Oh, well, that's just human nature. No, he said, get it out. Purge it from the city. Purge it from the nation. What do we do when we sin? Oh, that's just human nature. We purge it from ourselves. And we walk perfect with Jehovah, our God. That's what God wants us to do. He doesn't want us to make excuses for our sin. He wants us to purge ourselves and be perfect before him. Christ makes us perfect. But we grow in that grace. And we grow closer to Christ. And we sin less so that we don't rely on that we don't use that as an excuse, is what I'm trying to say. We have Christ there as our Savior, our sacrifice. His blood continues to cleanse us. But imagine him on the cross, and he is taking all of our sin on himself. And every time we sin, that's more we add to that burden. And if I can reach a point in my life where I am no longer adding to the Lord's burden, is that not a worthy goal? I'm gonna do my best. I may not make it. I may not ever reach a point of perfection, but I am sure going to try. You shall be perfect with Jehovah your God. I didn't say that. I'm not making that up. That's something that's right there in the black and white. For these nations which you shall possess hearkened unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for you, Jehovah your God has not suffered you so to do. He hasn't allowed you to do that. He's going to provide those things. He's going to provide the information that they need. He's going to reveal his will to them. He's going to tell them the future that they need to know. And they don't need to try to grasp that control and that power for themselves. And then we shift gears. It's related, but we're going to shift gears one last topic here. And this is where we're going to end up in the New Testament for a minute. Jehovah your God will raise up unto you a prophet. Now notice the translators have capitalized this because they have the benefit of hindsight. We know from Acts chapter 3, which we'll get to in a second, that Moses is actually prophesying about Jesus. So they capitalize this because they know they're talking about Jesus. Jehovah your God will raise up unto you a prophet from the midst of you, of your brethren, like unto me. That's not Joshua. That's not Samson. That's not Samuel. That's not David. Although David is also a type of Christ. This prophet is Jesus. Unto him shall you hearken. This prophet is going to be like to Moses. I've heard people that have told me that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are not part of the New Testament because they are recordings of what Jesus did while he was on earth before the cross. And so it was during the time period before the cross, and thus it was under the Old Testament. So all those things were under the Old Testament. And Jesus could not have said more than what the Old Testament said. If he taught anything that was contrary to the Old Testament, he would have been violating the Old Testament. Jesus never violated the law of Moses. He was sinless. He never taught people to violate the law of Moses before the cross. What he did was say, this is how it is now, but in my kingdom, in other words, after the cross, when the law will have been fulfilled and no longer in authority, this is the new law. So how was Jesus like unto Moses? He was a prophet. He had a message from God. That's what a prophet is. Not necessarily somebody who tells the future, although Jesus did that, Moses did that. Obviously, he's doing it right now. But more importantly, prophecy is about a message that is divinely revealed from God through the prophet to the people. Things they needed to know that they couldn't discover for themselves. It had to be revealed. So he's a prophet. He's a lawgiver. Moses gave them the law of Moses. That's why it's called the law of Moses. We are now under the law of Christ because Christ was a lawgiver. Anybody who says we're not under law, we're under grace, they don't know what they're talking about. Yes, we are under grace, but grace is the law of Christ. It is a better law built on better promises than the law of Moses. Law and grace are not mutually exclusive. Law of Moses and grace are mutually exclusive, yes, because they're two different laws. But Jesus was a lawgiver. Jesus was a mediator. Jesus was a judge. Is a judge. I should be saying is, because he is all these things. Jesus is the antitype of Moses. Moses was just a type, probably the most complete type out of all of the Old Testament types pointing to Jesus. The only thing that Moses really wasn't that I see that Jesus is king. David is the typifying of Jesus as king. But Moses did a whole bunch of things for physical Israel that Jesus does for spiritual Israel, which is the church. And so this is a prophecy. Now I'm gonna finish this part here through verse 19, and then I'm gonna go to Acts chapter 3. It says, God is gonna raise up a prophet from the midst of thee, of your brethren, like unto me, and to him shall you hearken. It's out of the brethren. So the Messiah, the prophet, was going to come out of the Jews. They should have been looking for all of these signs. They should have connected all these dots. Here's one of them. According to all that you desired of Jehovah your God in Horeb and the day of the assembly. That's we call Mount Sinai as Horeb. That's just a later name for it. Saying, let me not hear again the voice of Jehovah my God, neither let me see this great fire any more, that I die not. Remember when they were at Sinai, the people were afraid. They saw the fire and the smoke, and they were like, no, we don't want to see this. It's too terrible. Moses, you go up there and you talk to him. And so God says, okay, Moses, come on up to the mountain and talk. I'm gonna give you the law. And then Moses came, his face was glowing, he had put a veil over his face because people couldn't even stand to look at Moses. And the New Testament talks about this, the veil being taken away, that the Jews never had the veil taken away in terms of the Jewish state or whatever. They still were in ignorance or whatever. There was still a separation. But Christ was going to be like Moses. He was going to be the mediator, just as Moses was the mediator between Israel and the Father. When Moses went up to the mountain and spoke to God, he was a mediator between God and man. Not in exactly the same way that Jesus is, because Moses was holy man, was never divine, but Jesus would be the spiritual antitype of that. And the people cannot stand to be in the presence of God the Father lest they die. So they need somebody that can be that mediator, that go-between. And Jesus, taking on the form of a man, becoming man himself, is that perfect go-between, that perfect mediator. And Jehovah said unto me, they have well spoken that which they have spoken. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren like unto you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. What did Jesus say? The words that I speak are not mine, but him that sent me. His words are those that I speak. Jesus did not come up with anything on his own. He was in perfect harmony with the Father and the Spirit. That is what it means to be divine. That was what it means to be God. Jesus was not separate from God. They had perfect unity. And so Jesus could not make any claims to say, well, this is me saying this, not really God the Father talking, but no. Jesus says, I am speaking all that the Father has given to me. Jesus had to empty himself to be human. He still had the divine nature, but he did not have the omni of deity. He obviously wasn't omnipresent because he was relegated to the physical reality of being a human being. But he was still divine in his essence, if not with the full glory. That's why in John 17 he says, now glorify me with the glory that I had from you from the beginning. Philippians talks about him emptying himself to become a man. Okay? But Jesus, being man, could be that mediator. He can face God and survive and then speak to the rest of mankind, just the way that Moses did. He speaks only what the Father tells him to speak. Verse 19, and it shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto my words which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. And that phrase there, I will require it of him, means you're going to pay the price for not listening to my prophet. What is Moses prophesying here? I'm going to send Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the antitype of all the types in the Old Testament, and he is going to preach to you the will of God, and you better listen to him when he comes, or I will destroy you. What happened in the first century? God sends his only begotten Son, the fulfillment of all of the Old Testament types, the perfect antitype, the prophet, the priest, the king, the savior. And those who listened were saved. And the Jewish state refused to listen, and they were destroyed in the first century. And it all wraps up together. The Bible is not a memory verse or a collection of memory verses that are all separate, distinct, individual things to be learned by rote memorization. It is a story, a single, complete vision, a communication from the creator of the universe, and it has to be understood that way. From the beginning to the very end. This is not disconnected from the New Testament. This is not disconnected from Olivet. This is not disconnected from Revelation or any of the other passages that speak of the end of the Jews, the last days, judgment, baptism with fire, all of those things. It's all the same. Those who do not hearken unto my words, not the prophet's words, my words, through the prophet, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. And then he speaks more generically here about other prophets. Jesus spoke of those prophets too in his day, the false prophets. But the prophet which shall presume, there's that presumption again, to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak. There it is, going beyond what God has specified. Or that shall speak in the name of other gods. That's bad stuff. Even that prophet shall die. So a prophet that says, God said this, and God didn't really say that, put him to death. Or a prophet says, this other God, he also said this. You should listen to this other God, put him to death. Get rid of it. Purge the sin from among you. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which Jehovah had spoken? It's a good question. Got this guy says he's a prophet of God. How do we know? Well, when a prophet speaks in the name of Jehovah, if the thing does not follow nor come to pass, that is the thing which Jehovah has not spoken. But the prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Remember, presumption is evil. You shall not be afraid of him. So anytime a prophet prophesies in such a way that he's predicting the future, if even one time his prophecy does not come true, you know he's not a prophet of God. I have a book that I have several books that deal with the Latter-day Saints, what people commonly call the Mormons. It has detailed in it specific, explicit, dated prophecies given by Joseph Smith. 52 of them, in fact, that did not come true. All you need is one. Somebody claims to be a prophet of God. Now, they're going to come in two varieties. Number one, they're going to prophesy in a way that is very specific and detailed and always wrong. If you look at these modern day prophets, prophesying the end of the world, prophesying this or that, they're speaking with prophecy of God, and all that kind of nonsense. And they'll give you dates. I've calculated through the book of Revelation and all this, but it's really, they're claiming to be prophets of God. And they'll give you a date, and the date will come and the date will go, and what they prophesied does not come to be. That person is a liar. Why is anybody still listening to that nut? The first time one of these charlatans gets up there and makes a prophecy and it doesn't come true, their followers should never start in the first place. But at that point, their viewership should drop to 0. You made a prophecy, it didn't come true, we're out of here because you're obviously false. Because God says that when a prophet speaks in the name of Jehovah and it does not follow or come to pass, he's speaking presumptuously. He's not a prophet of God. And you shall not be afraid of him. You shall not listen to him. You shall not hear him. He's fake, false, charlatan. Put him to death. Under the Old Testament. Under the Old Testament. Under the New Testament, we don't put people to death like that anymore because things are shifted from the physical to the spiritual or whatever. They're going to suffer the consequences, the eternal consequences of their sin. But purge him from your life. Or her. There's female fake prophets too. Why would anybody follow Joseph Smith? 52 failed. And the other type of fake false prophecy are the crystal ball types where they'll prophesy vague things and it sounds good and they'll let you fill in all the details and stuff. So it sounds like it comes to pass all the time, but it's because they're so vague that eventually it's going to come to pass because they didn't specify anything. They let you fill it in, so you're already heading in that direction anyway. So anyway, that is Deuteronomy chapter 18 in the can, as they say. Little bit different, interesting chapter. Some powerful stuff in here. Prophecies of Christ. I don't think I ever went to Acts chapter 3. Let's cover that real quick. Acts chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. Peter confirms that Moses was prophesying of Christ. That's not just us making it up. We want to let the Bible interpret itself. So Peter comes along through inspiration. For Moses truly said unto the fathers, a prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me. Him shall you hear in all things whatsoever he shall say unto you. So that's a direct quote out of Deuteronomy 18. And that shall come to pass that every soul which will not hear the prophet, remember Deuteronomy 18 said, I will require it of him. Peter tells us what that means. It shall come to pass that every soul which will not hear that prophet shall be destroyed from among the people. That's what that meant. I will require it of them means they will be destroyed. And so we're told here the prophecy, Peter quotes from Deuteronomy 18, identifies the prophet as Jesus, and reminds the Jews, because that's his audience. God says when this prophet comes, you better listen to him or you're going to be destroyed. So that's Acts chapter 3, verses 22 and 23, quoting Deuteronomy chapter 18. So that's Deuteronomy 18. Finished up here. Great chapter. Another very interesting chapter to me. All these chapters are so much more interesting to me studying them this way. And I hope people watching these videos don't necessarily take my word for it or look to me as some kind of an authority. I am no authority. I'm just a guy with a word search, a Bible search engine, a little bit of knowledge, but I'm on the same journey you are. I'm just a guide, and I really hope that this inspires you, not supernaturally, but inspires you to really go dig into the Word for yourself and study the Old Testament in a way that is meaningful, that you dig down into it and really try to understand how it's all connected. And when you do that, it isn't oh, we're reading through Leviticus, oh, we're reading through Deuteronomy, and there's all these laws, and it's such a snooze fest. Everybody makes fun of that because that's how they've been taught to read it. But if you look at the Old Testament the right way and you see all of the connections that are made throughout the rest of the Bible, it is so powerful and so eye-opening to read these allegedly boring books. They're not boring at all. They're super powerful. So anyway, I hope I've helped in some small way to inspire you to do your own studies, to come to your own conclusions, and to really dig down into this stuff. And it's 11:30 here, so I'm gonna hit the hay and let you guys go, and you can join me next time for the next chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 19. My name is Ernie Lawrence. This has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation, and you guys have a wonderful night.